Hello listeners, my name is Madeline and this is a short podcast episode which I've made for the Oakville Museum and I'm going to call it The Tales of Haunted Oakville. Today I'm going to talk about some of Oakville's history and a few ghost stories based on these historical locations and events. There are 4 specific stories: the Flower Lady, Paranormal Activity in Market Square, the Dingle Park Dancer, and the Lions Valley Legends. They are all ghost stories based on real events in Oakville's history, which makes them slightly more believable and interesting. I personally find these stories to be slightly scary and make it more fun to live in this town and walk through Old Oakville, especially at night. So get settled, grab a hot drink and a snack, and get ready to hear some of Oakville's most haunting legends. The first Oakville legend I'm going to talk about is the sighting of the Flower Lady at Ercles Estate. This estate was established by Oakville's founder, Colonel William Chisholm. He served in the York Militia in the War of 1812. Then he settled in Nelson Township in 1816, before 1827 when he purchased 960 acres of land at a public auction and laid out a town plot and created a harbor port at the mouth of the creek in Trafalgar Township, now downtown Oakville's lakeshore. It became an official port of entry in 1834, and Chisholm was collector of customs and postmaster. In 1835, he built a brick building at the edge of the water. It was first used as a general store. Then in 1839, he added an addition, and eventually the building became his family's residence. It was named Ercles Estate after Ercles Castle in Invernessshire in Scotland, where the Chisholms come from. 6 generations of Chisholms lived in this estate up until the 1960s, and William's great-granddaughter, Hazel Chisholm Matthews, created the Oakville Historical Society in 1952. At one point it was rented to tenants, and then the Ercles Estate became the Oakville Museum in the 1980s. This estate has been the site of many supposed spooky sightings. It was even featured in an episode of YTV's ghost hunting show, Ghost Trackers, in 2008. It's featured in many Canadian books on hauntings, such as Haunted Ontario 4, Encounters with Ghostly Shadows, Apparitions, and Spirits by Terry Boyle. There are said to be many spirits haunting the property, about 9 distinct ones, which are linked back to the historical figures which used to live in the house. One of these sightings is called the Flower Lady. Multiple people who worked at Ercles Estate or lived near, like Joyce Burnell, author of Ghosts of Oakville, have seen this apparition. The ghost lady is sighted at the gate of the garden. Joyce Burnell interviewed a woman who was a tenant at the house, and she saw the Flower Lady. She was standing there, staring at her, holding a basket for collecting flowers, wearing a light-colored dress with a flowery pattern and her hair pulled tightly back. Then she disappeared from where she was. The tenant then found pictures of the Chisholms in the custom house, and a picture of Rebecca Silverthorne Chisholm, wife of Colonel William Chisholm, who looked like the Flower Lady who appeared in the garden. If a ghost were to appear on the property, it would make sense for it to be the original lady of the house doing an activity she did while she was alive. She was also the namesake for Rebecca Street. She was born in 1795 and passed away in 1865, at 69 years old, and is buried in the St. Mary's Pioneer Cemetery with all the other Chisholms who settled here. It is rumored that Rebecca died of a heart attack in front of the garden gate. However, I don't believe that claim can be proven, because the cause and location of her death is unclear. Even if she didn't pass in that very spot, it's plausible that her spirit would return to her home in her beautiful garden. In the claimed sightings of her spirit, she didn't seem scary, but she makes a personal connection with you by making eye contact. She could even be an echo of the past and not a full ghost, because she's doing something so routine in her real life. If you enjoy the idea of encountering Rebecca Chisholm's spirit, you could visit the estate and see if you experience the paranormal. And if you don't believe in ghosts, you could still visit Ercles Estate or walk nearby and have fun imagining she's in her garden right now, picking flowers. Or at least she was 155 years ago. Next, my second Oakville legend to discuss is the paranormal activity in Market Square. As I said before, William Chisholm bought 960 acres of land in 1827. In 1835, he set some sections aside for public use. One of these sections is William Street and Navy Street. This area has been designated a public use area since then, and it remains one to this day. In 1859, a 2-story building was built around this intersection. It was used for the purpose of town hall and also lockup or jail. The bottom floor was used as the detainment area for immigrants to quarantine and criminals, while the top floor was used as the council chambers for Oakville's town hall. The town hall and jail were run by Constable George J. Sumner. He was Oakville's chief constable from 1865 to 1902. He was a very respected and upstanding citizen of the town, and he was known for many outstanding civic duties and his observations in his 40 diaries, now called the Sumner Diaries. He wrote about daily life in Oakville at the time, recording information from the economic depression to the new development of electricity and even community events. He was also a dog catcher, sanitation officer, janitor, ticket taker at town hall, immigration officer, superintendent of roads and sidewalks, undertaker's assistant, summer steamer agent, tax collector, harbor master, and health officer. Later on, in 1862, they constructed a second, similarly shaped two-story building called the Market Building. It was built in a location near the town hall. The building was an indoor food market and meeting place. The bottom floor was used for farmers and butchers to sell various meats and produce, while the top floor was used to house events and many different public meetings. There was even an auditorium with a piano to have entertainment. Suddenly, in 1876, a fire broke out in the town hall lockup building, and it burned down and was completely destroyed. Constable George Sumner would jail people if they had no money to stay somewhere, and his wife Mary would bring them food for dinner. The Sumners' house was nearby to the town hall lockup, and it could be seen from their window. The night of the fire, George had looked out his window while preparing for bed and saw it had caught fire. He rushed outside and was able to rescue the 5 men he had let stay there for the night. However, he wasn't able to stop the fire and the building burned down. From then, the town used the Market Building as the town hall and jail instead. By 1908, they founded the Oakville Lawn Bowling Club, and its building and lawn were built in the same area of William and Navy Street. This expanded the use of the Market Square area. Then, again in 1911, a fire demolished the repurposed Market Building, and the town hall and jail was destroyed again. By this time, George Sumner had passed away in 1911, and no one was able to save the building. That means this Market Square experienced the town hall lockup burning to the ground on 2 separate occasions within 35 years. Now in our current day, what resides there is a small parquet with benches and historical plaques, and maybe spirits are still there too. People who have visited this location experienced many forms of paranormal activity. There are claims of hearing lots of different strange sounds in the area, especially at night. Another notable experience is the faint smell of burning and smoke in the Market Square, which supposedly gets progressively stronger and becomes more acrid and aggressive as Halloween approaches and the veil between worlds thins. This is an important spirit sighting because the land experienced the town hall and jailhouse burning down twice in its history, so it makes sense that the events left a mark on the land. One ghostly experience which is present often is of a spirit named Philip. Apparently he communicated with a medium who was touring the Market Square, and he's a friendly spirit who welcomes tours. He often makes himself known to visitors and is willing to make contact. Although there's no specific Philip associated with the area, he could be related to the jail or really anything else which used to be there. There may not be ghosts in the Market Square, but there's definitely something interesting about visiting this location. The third story I'm going to tell is the legends surrounding Dingle Park. Dingle Park is a small park at the waterside with a beautiful view of Toronto's skyline, which used to be a thriving local swimming hole. This location is considered a part of the Old Oakville Heritage Conservation District, which is the land that was part of William Chisholm's original 960-acre purchase. Dingle Park is one of these historical locations which remains fairly unaffected and similar to the way it would have been when it was first created. It's located at 240 Front Street. Nearby to this park there have been many businesses over the years. One specific location, 212 Front Street, was many important landmarks over the history of Oakville. It was originally built in the 1870s as a paint factory. Then in 1892 it became an electric generating plant called the Electric Light Cottage. By the early 1920s it was a guest room. In 1925, a woman named Edith Brown bought the property and created a tea room called the Worn Doorstep, based on the title of Margaret Sherwood's 1916 novel about England in World War II. The combination of a local swimming hole and park with a nearby tea room made this location an incredibly popular place to visit. Being a local access to the lake without any supervision, there's sure to be a few accidents. This spot may have a past of drownings in the lake. Of all the lives which have been claimed at this spot, one which has been recounted most often is that of an unnamed little girl in the mid-1920s. The story says that a young family was spending a hot summer day at the lake shore while visiting town. They stopped in at the Worn Doorstep tea room and were having a lovely day. Later on, they supposedly went down to Dingle Park for a swim to cool off from the day's heat. The parents let the young girl, often said to be 3 to 6 years of age, take a swim in the lake. Somehow an accident happened and the little girl tragically drowned. This death inspired many different stories and retellings, as well as cautionary tales. Even though this child and her family remains anonymous in history, but due to the location's past, it's probable that it was a true event which took place. The legend has varied, but the basic story remains the same. It states that the little girl who drowned there can be seen at the park at night, standing on the rocks barefooted with wet clothes, dancing like she had gotten out of the water from a swim. This beautiful location has an interesting and tragic history, and whether you choose to believe the haunting legend, it's a lovely location to visit during the day, or try to see her dancing for yourself at night. And finally, the last Oakville legend I'm going to talk about is the haunting of Lions Valley Park. Now Lions Valley Park is a wonderful spot for day trips, spending time in nature, hiking, fishing, and family fun. You can drive to it or even walk to it through 16 Mile Creek's trails. It's located underneath the 16-mile bridge at Dundas Street. It's a fairly well-known spot, however it has a much lesser-known history. It happens to be built on the site of an old village called 16 Hollow, which was settled at the same time as Oakville was beginning to grow. In 1825, a man named George Chalmers moved into the area and established a merchant shop, and eventually a dam at the mouth of the creek, a sawmill and a grist mill. It was then briefly known as Chalmers Mills to the locals. It became a small, thriving settlement that had many businesses, like a blacksmith shop, a tavern, a distillery, an ashery, and stables. A particularly important business was in sending timber and barrel staves, mostly white oak, down the river to Oakville's harbor to be exported. By the 1840s, George Chalmers became bankrupt and sold all of his businesses to a man called John Proudfoot. This caused the village to then be called Proudfoot's Hollow by its inhabitants. The small community continued to grow, gaining an inn, a tannery, a carding mill, and many weavers, tailors, shoemakers, and other businesses. By then they had a flourishing community, with some homes, a schoolhouse, and a church. The village consisted mostly of Scottish Presbyterians, and so a church was built on the east bank of the creek in 1844, and it became a social center for the town. Oakville's Reverend Robert Murray at the time, from the town's Presbyterian congregation, would even visit them. At its peak, 16 Hollow had approximately 500 residents. Soon, in 1855, the railroad was being constructed and it bypassed 16 Hollow and went directly to Oakville instead. From then, the settlement began to decline. As Oakville continued to grow and thrive, 16 Hollow began to die out. Eventually, when the world's grain market collapsed, it hit 16 Hollow very hard and there was no coming back from this. By the 1880s, the mill was shut down and only 2 houses and the church remained in the previously prosperous village. Now, all that's left is some ruins of the various bridges which were built above the park. The first Dundas Street Bridge was built in 1885 to replace the previous mill dam which was used as a crossing. The original bridge was then replaced in 1921, and in 1960 they replaced it with a 4-lane bridge. Then, most recently, they put another 4-lane bridge in 2008. All of that construction and disruption could bother any so-called ghosts residing in the park. The only other piece of 16 Hollow which survives to this day is the original church. Above Lions Valley, the park is actually surrounded by 3 different cemeteries: the Knox Presbyterian Cemetery, the Trafalgar Lawn Cemetery, and the St. Vladimir Cemetery. All of these locations are high on the cliffs above Lions Valley and back directly onto the drop into the park. It is said that as the walls of the valley erode, more and more spirits are let in and trapped inside the valley. One particularly haunting rumor stated that after very destructive storms, caskets have come out of the cliff walls, fallen into the valley, and even floated down 16 Mile Creek, but I've yet to find any real solid evidence to actually back up that claim. Whether or not the supposed spirits are coming from the surrounding burial grounds and being eternally trapped in Lions Valley Park, the land certainly has a lot of history, which leaves open the possibility of ghosts in the area. Many people who visit this park, especially at night, report sightings of paranormal activity. It's a lovely spot to picnic and hike during the day. However, after dark there are many accounts of strange experiences. Many people claim to see white, green, and red spirit orbs throughout the park and woods, in spots which are too densely wooded to be a person. Some have even seen blurry, misty, human-like figures and apparitions running along the edge of the forest. There have also been claims that people have seen big, bright flashes in the sky above the park, like lightning except there was nothing suggesting a thunderstorm. Even many people who don't see apparitions still have an uneasy feeling as if they're not alone. Some have even reported feeling nauseous and a strong urge to leave the park immediately. These ghost encounters may or may not be true, but it can be fun to entertain the idea, and based on its history, the evidence of ghosts can be compelling. Even if you don't believe these tales, the park has an interesting history of going from a thriving town, much like Oakville, to a ghost town and a popular recreation area. Anyone could visit this park and enjoy ghost hunting or just the rich history. So, that was the end of the stories. I hope you enjoyed these tales about our town and were spooked by the spirits or just enjoyed hearing the history of Oakville. I know that I enjoy knowing these stories about different locations in this town, and I hope you do too. If you did, and you'd like to learn more about these legends, you can go on the Oakville Historical Society's Ghost Walk tours during October to visit some haunted locations in historical Oakville. Assuming they're running this year due to COVID, of course. You can check in on that at the Oakville Historical Society website if you're interested. Well, thank you for listening, and have a spooky night.